Alright, wrap up chapter 8, hyperbolas. So we've done ellipses, we've done parabolas, and now we have hyperbolas. So we're going to be able to find the equation, vertices, and foci of a hyperbola now. Okay, so you can see the definition there. The fixed points are the foci. You can see foci again. You've got two vertices now, okay, and then you have a center point. Your focal axis, okay, is the line that goes through the foci, so that's pretty much the same as everything we've been doing so far. If your hyperbola is centered at 0, 0, here are the two scenarios, okay. If the number under x squared is bigger, that means your focal axis will be the x-axis, okay, and as you can see, if that was the focal axis was the x-axis, what would happen is your parabola would go this way. Okay, if the number under y squared is bigger, then you're going to have opening this way. And as you can see here, you have asymptotes now. Okay, so we're going to have to, if we have to graph a hyperbola, we're going to have to plot asymptotes as well. Okay, here's the picture. Okay, this is if the focal axis is the x-axis, and then this is if it's the y-axis. Okay? Alright, so we are trying to find the vertices and foci of the hyperbola. Again, just like ellipse, we want it to equal 1. So we want to divide all these terms by 36. So we get x squared over 9 minus y squared over 4 equals 1. Okay? So our vertices, now the number under x squared is bigger, so that means our vertices are on the x-axis, so 3, 0, and negative 3, 0 would be our vertices in this case. Now the foci, okay, if you remember from ellipses, let's go back here. Alright, ellipses, it was a squared minus b squared. Well, now for hyperbolas, we add a squared and b squared, and we take the square root. So now I've got c squared equals 9 plus 4. So c is plus or minus radical 13. So our foci are radical 13, 0, and negative radical 13, 0. Okay? And remember, the vertices and the foci are always on the same axis. And it's the x-axis in this case because 9 is under x squared, and that's the bigger number. Okay, they want us to find the equation of the hyperbola with foci 0, negative 3, and 0, 3, whose conjugate axis has length 4. Sketch the hyperbola and its asymptotes and support your sketch with a grapher. Now, first things first, okay, when I graph this, here are my foci. My foci are on the y-axis. Okay? Foci are on the y-axis. Okay? Now, what happens is, okay, the conjugate axis has length 4. So what that means, conjugate means like the minor axis. Okay? So when we have our hyperbola, okay, our major axis is the y-axis. So if I come back here, okay, the focal axis is the y-axis. So this is what our equation is going to look like. Y squared is going to come first. Okay, so y squared minus x squared equals 1. Now that means that the larger number is going to be under y squared. So to find b, all I have to do is take the length of that 4, the conjugate axis, the length of the minor axis is 4, divided by 2, which is 2. Okay, so 2 squared goes right there. Now, to find out what a squared is, I go back to my c squared equals a squared plus b squared situation. Well, c squared C comes from right there. So that's 3 squared, which is 9. Whoops. It's not squared. You already squared it. Equals A squared, because we don't know that, plus B squared, which is 4. So that means that A squared, whoops. So that means, whoops. That means that A squared equals 5. So 5 goes right here. Now, we can just erase this 2 squared and make it 4. All right. So that, here's our equation. Okay. Now, our asymptotes. We have to, if we're going to graph a hyperbola, we need to have asymptotes. Now I go back. Okay. Y squared came first, so y equals plus or minus a over bx. So our asymptotes, y equals a over b. So plus or minus, a is radical 5 over 2x. Now remember, that breaks down to y equals radical 5 over 2x, and it means that y equals negative radical 5 over 2x. Now, to graph these, okay, the square root of 5 is about 2.24. So my rise would be a little bit more than 2 and then over 2. Okay? So a little bit up and then kind of right in here. And then it would be in the same place down here. Okay? So there's my first asymptote. Now I do the negative. Well, that's just the same thing, just on the other side. Whoops. So there's my other asymptote. Now, my vertices, okay, my vertices, I don't have any room. My vertices are 0 plus or minus radical 5. They're on the y-axis because the foci are on the y-axis. So our vertex, our vertices, I don't want to do that. Oh, so annoying. So my vertices are going to be right there. Now, notice my curves go through the vertex, and they're wide because they approach those asymptotes, but they never touch them. Okay? So when you're graphing a hyperbola, really what you're doing is you have to graph vertices, asymptotes, and then draw your curves. Okay? What happens when the hyperbolas don't have the center at 0, 0? Well, you can see here. Okay? So they want us to find the standard form of the equation for the hyperbola whose transverse axis has endpoints -2, -1, and 8, -1, and whose conjugate axis has length 8. Now, when they say transverse axis, okay, they are talking about the major axis. Okay? Notice how the y coordinates are the same. Okay? So, here's our x minus h squared over a squared minus y minus k squared over b squared equals 1. So we have to find hk, a squared, b squared. Now, the center. Remember for ellipse, we did the midpoint formula? Well, we're going to do the midpoint formula again on these 2 points. Okay? So midpoint formula gets us what? It gets us 3, -1. So that means I have x minus 3 squared minus y plus 1 squared equals 1. Now, remember, conjugate means the minor axis. Okay? So the bigger number is going to be under the x-axis because the transverse axis has those endpoints. The conjugate axis means that the smaller number, in this case, is going to be under y because obviously it's got to go somewhere. So b equals 8, its length, divided by 2. So b is 4. So 4 squared is 16. And then a, okay, a, the length of a, use these 2 points, the length of a is 10 divided by 2, which is 5. 5 squared is 25. And there's our equation. Okay? That's how you do it. Now, they want us to find the center, vertices, and foci of the hyperbola. Okay, so we have, again, center, vertices, and foci. Center's easy, -2, 5. Okay, just get it from the parentheses. All right. Now, where's the bigger number? The bigger number is underneath y. So that means that our foci and our vertices are going to be h plus or minus a k. All right, because the bigger number is under the y. So -2 plus or minus. Now a is square root of 9, 3. And then 5. So our vertices are 1, 5, and -5, 5. Okay? And then our foci, h plus or minus c, k. So h is -2 plus or minus. Now we got to figure out what c is. But again, c squared equals a squared plus b squared. So c squared equals 58. 9 plus 49. Okay? So you get the square root of 58 for c. Now, if you figured that out and like did the square roots and all that, you would get 5.625, and you would get -9.625. Okay, so there are your foci. Here's your vertices. Okay, so that is hyperbolas.